All right, welcome to Community CPA's Saturday webinar. So we're going to talk about ERC-related self-checking. Okay, so this is actually a continuation of the talk that we gave on Tuesday, so a few days ago, related to how we self-check ERC compliance. So all of this, of course, were relevant to IRS's moratorium that was issued on September 14, 2023. So let me quickly share screen to make it easier for everyone to follow along. All right, so as I mentioned, so we're talking about some self-checking ERC compliance. So the topic of the day is going to be on eligibility, ERC eligibility by government COVID orders. That's myself, Steve Howe, PhD, a professor, and I'm currently working at Community CPA, and our phone number here is 515-288-3188. All right, as usual, a quick disclaimer. So if you're just listening to this webinar, that does not constitute a client relationship with us, so we cannot be responsible for any damages that you just do it on your own, following the information that's given in the webinars. And so, of course, if you're not sure how to do things, you want a specific service, so you're welcome to become our clients. Just contact us and become our clients. And a few words about our firm. So first of all, our webpage. So the website, communitycpa.com, and that's where you can find our past and future webinars. So including today. So that'll be you can find the announcement for the webinars, and also you can go to our YouTube channel, Community CPA YouTube channel, to find the past, today's, and the future webinars. And we're a regional CPA firm with 3 offices, 2 in the state of Iowa and 1 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And of course, we provide a full suite of CPA services, so including the regular accounting, tax filings, payroll, audit of financial statements. Okay, so and then also business and legal advisory services. And we do have attorneys, licensed attorneys on staff. Also, our staff collectively speak 9 different languages, so we can serve clients in different languages, including Chinese, Spanish, Vietnamese, and a few other ones. All right, let's come to the subject of the day. So we're going to talk about self-checking, how to self-check ERC eligibility based on government COVID orders. And to give a little background, okay? So many of you by now should have heard already, and some of you probably have even attended or listened to my prior webinars. So I actually gave one on the 16th of September about IRS, the moratorium that was issued on the 14th. So IRS, in that moratorium, suspended, the IRS announced the temporary suspension of processing of new ERC claims through at least the end of 2023. But probably not too much longer after that. That's my prediction. Okay, so simply because, so as I mentioned in my other webinar related to that moratorium, April 14, 2024 is actually the filing deadline for 2020 ERCs. So, so IRS likely will not, extend that moratorium, if it get extended at all, much longer than the end of this year. And in that same announcement, IRS also talk about several other things, so including how it's going to handle the pending ERC claims. So IRS, stated that it'll process the pending ERC claims with increased scrutiny. And so that means so it's going to take longer, and there will be more scrutinies, and so IRS may even ask for more documentation. And of course, so IRS is started auditing some of the ERC claims, and IRS is setting up repayment or withdrawal programs. So the details of these are coming. These are for for ERC claimants who either have claimed or have a claim pending with IRS, but subsequently they have determined they may not be eligible. So the IRS does have some details coming for employers in those categories to either repay the ERC or to withdraw the pending ERC claims. And in that moratorium, IRS also gave several recommendations for employers that have received ERC, but now believe that the claims were improper. Okay, so then for those, and then IRS recommend you wait for the details of repayment program. Okay, so that you can repay the ERC back to IRS. Okay, and then if you have a pending ERC claim, IRS recommends that you carefully review the rules and guidances, rules and guidelines, and if you determine that you are not eligible, then you should consider withdrawing. Okay, so this would include many claims that were based on the so-called supply chain disruptions. So some of the details of the supply chain disruptions were in IRS's announcement. You can find that. As also, I have talked about. I have gave 2 webinars related to the supply chain disruptions in the past. In light of IRS's July 2023 Attorney General opinion. Okay, Attorney General from the Chief Counsel of IRS. Okay, issued a legal opinion related to the supply chain. So that was in July. So I personally have given 2 webinars on that. So of course you can find, and you find that Attorney General, the Chief Counsel opinion or Chief Counsel memo in many other sources. All right. So anyway, also if you are considering filing, so which means that you think you might be eligible, and then you are gathering information and you want to file, okay, the claim for ERC. So IRS does recommend that you should carefully review the rules and guidelines, so then before you file the claims. All right. So in light of those IRS recommendations, so we are coming up with several webinars. So we gave one already on Tuesday. So this is the second of our number of webinars. So we don't know how many we'll be giving. So that may depend on how much time we have and also how much demand our clients and our audience have. All right. So, but anyway, so in light of those IRS recommendations, we are coming up with some webinars, to provide some information about how to do the self-review for the ERC compliance. And in fact, we have given a number of those relevant webinars in the past, including, for instance, back in October of 2022. So we knew that IRS IRS audit is coming. Even back then, we know that was coming. So then we kind of summarized the ERC requirements. An audit you can't predict what's going to be audited because we know what the requirements of ERC. So from eligibility to the calculations with all the exclusions and all that. So in the October 2022 webinar, we did talk a lot of those things in detail. So for those who are interested, you can go back and listen to that one. And then we are, as I mentioned earlier, so we are giving several one of those right now. So so hope that you can, so that'll help you further to try to do your self-checking of the ERC eligibility. All right, and then so today our focus is on ERC eligibility based on government orders. So let me just quickly summarize the laws in general for ERC, and not just for government order. Okay, so the ERC laws as of November 15, 2021. So we have those 4 laws that were passed. So the first one was the CARES Act, March 2020. So in that, the ERC was introduced. That program was introduced for the 4 quarters in 2020. But of course, the first quarter is only limited to the about 19 days or even maybe 18 days in March. Okay. So the eligibility criteria in CARES Act was, from 2022, was a revenue drop by more than 50%, or well, actually, the revenue, the official term is gross receipts. Okay, so I just made a simple, so just revenue drop by 50%, more than 50% actually. So, and then also, or by government orders that require your business operation to fully or partially suspend during some period of time. Okay, so the CARES Act initially was unclear about whether you can claim a PPP or ERC, whether you can benefit under both programs. So IRS initially actually claimed that you can only choose one or the other. So that's one of the reasons, I guess, in 2020, no one was even talking about the ERC, and because everybody was doing PPP. But the later Congress did clarify, so that's as a part of this Consolidated Appropriations Act. So you are allowed to claim ERC even if you had obtained a PPP loans, provided you're not counting the same wage twice. Okay, so there's no double dipping. So the wages you counted for PPP forgiveness cannot be used for ERC. And so other than that restriction, so you are allowed to both claim ERC and apply obtain PPP. And also, the Congress did extend the ERC period in those laws. So in the CAA, for example, it extended into the first and second quarter, and later in the American Rescue Plan Act. So it actually extended into 2021 from the first quarter all the way to fourth quarter. But eventually, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that repealed the fourth quarter for those employers that were qualifying under criteria 1 or 2. Okay, so 1 is a revenue drop, and 2 is a government order. And so, but this act still allowed those recovery startup business to still claim in ERC, to still claim ERC in fourth quarter of 2021. Okay, so that's a quick summary of all the laws that were passed by the Congress, so related to ERC. And so the criteria 1 and 2, so that's for both 2020, 4 quarters in 2020, and the first 3 quarters in 2021. But the threshold is different in respect to the revenue drop criteria. Okay, so for 2020, it's greater than 50%. 2021, that's 20%. Okay, so there are some other details related to the revenue drop. For example, you don't need all quarters to have the 50% drop in 2020. So you actually just need 1 quarter to have 50, let's say more than 50% drop. Then you would have at least 2 quarters to be eligible. So we may, come back and do another one covering the revenue drop. But anyway, so for 2021, it's 20% threshold. Okay. And So there are some other, rules going with that, such as the alternative quarter test rule for the 2021. All right. So, but our focus today is on the ERC eligibility based on government COVID orders. Okay. So before I go to that, let me also just quickly summarize the general guidance, ERC guidance that were issued by IRS. Okay. So, and those are the four main ones: 2021-20, -23, and -65. They actually are those were issued in relation to the four laws that were passed, related to ERC. Okay, so for example, 2021-20, that's related how you claim the ERC for 2020. And then you added 2 more quarters, so then added the 2 more quarters all the way to the 4th quarter. So the 2021-49, for example, that covers all the way to quarter 4 of 2021. So including the so-called startup recovery startup businesses. Okay, and then eventually when the Congress repealed quarter 4 for those under criteria 1 or 2. And so IRS also issued a related guidance, so the IRS Notice 2021-65. Okay, and IRS also kind of summarized all of those in a revenue procedure, and that's 2021-33. So if you're looking for official guidance, okay, besides the laws, which are difficult to comprehend for many, okay? So, and then, of course, IRS, if you're looking for official guidance, these are probably the best reference. So the IRS notices and the IRS revenue procedure 2021-33. All right, so now let's, in the remaining, we're going to turn our focus on the eligibility based on government COVID orders. All right, so again, let's begin with the laws on ERC eligibility based on government COVID orders. So that's actually in CARES Act, the first ERC law. So an eligible employer means any employer, blah blah blah, for which the operation of the business is fully or partially suspended during a calendar quarter, okay, due to an order from the appropriate government authority. All right, so that's the definition, but of course it's very abstract, so we don't know exactly, what the government authority means, and also what the full or partial suspension means, and all that. So those usually are, the implementing agencies such as IRS, would usually come up with rules and guidance on how to implement the law. So IRS did come up with a series of guidance. So, for example, this is the first IRS notice I mentioned earlier. So so in part 3 of that notice, item C. So there are several questions and answers. So, for example, there's answer 10, question 10 and answer 10. So that clarifies what are an appropriate government authority. So that include federal, state, and local government. Okay, so which means a county or city government. So you don't have to rely only on the president's order. So if your state had order, and even within the state, doesn't have to be the governor, can be the state health officer, and or other government officials, or also can be the local, which means a county or even your small city government order. All right, and but those orders, they do need to be related to the COVID-19. Okay, so these need to be the COVID-19 related government orders, and also those orders must have required your business to suspend fully or partially. And then further in that notice, the same notice, so in answer 11, I might have missed. The answer 11. So there are actually two parts. Okay, so I moved too quickly. And so the first part is that so the government order must have, when you try to rely on the partial suspension due to government order, so the suspended portion must be a non-nominal portion of your business. Okay, so that's and then in part 2 of that same answer, that's actually a very long answer. So I would say there may be even more than two parts. So the last part is actually related to some quantification of the non-nominal effect. Okay, so IRS did quantify the non-nominal effect to be 10%. Okay, so IRS also mentioned two ways to measure that 10%. So one is to measure the gross receipts of the part of the business that was suspended. Okay, that you need that part, the gross receipts corresponding or generated from the suspended part to constitute 10% or more of your entire gross receipts in 2019. Okay, so when you measure that, you're not measuring in 2020 or 2021 during the quarters that where you're actually claiming the ERC. So, but you need to look at the suspended portion of your business, and you want to measure how big that suspended portion is within your business operation. Okay, you want to know how big that is, and then you need that portion to be, the suspended portion to be 10% or more of your entire operation. But when you measure whether it's 10% or more, you actually go back to the normal or pre-pandemic, go back to the pre-pandemic year 2019 to measure to see if that portion that's suspended because of the government COVID order was more than 10% or more in your entire operations, right? Either in terms of the gross receipts or in terms of the service hours. Okay, so IRS just mentioned those two, but of course, even IRS's own examples, in my opinion, were going beyond those two ways. Okay, so IRS was measuring by IRS had several examples. They were all measuring the non-nominal effect by the 10% or by that the threshold, but it looks to me they were using a method that are outside those two particular ones. Okay, so but anyway, so that's in the official IRS notice answer 11, right? So that's where the where IRS quantified how you measure the affected part of your business operation. All right, and so IRS also kept on updating its ERC Webpages, and so for example, it made an update back in July, and also made some more updates in September. I would say those web pages are maybe less reliable in that sense because IRS they can just update the web page in a whim, and then you don't know, if you don't check the latest, so you might miss out on something. But it's still that's useful source of information, I would say. Okay, so the law, of course, that law and IRS guidance, official guidance, IRS notices. Those are the official reference. So IRS ERC webpage, that should also be considered official reference, but this probably less reliable than the IRS notices. And in IRS ERC webpages, it did talk about things that don't qualify. okay, that don't make you qualify for ERC, okay? So, and then, I mean, this particular screenshot here from the IRS, we're talking about the on the positive side, and so what orders, you can rely on. But there are other ones you should pay attention to. So the things that the IRS clearly says you cannot rely on those, whatever they are, and for ERC eligibility. And this one, okay. So one of such things that you cannot just rely on simply, is the supply chain disruption. Okay, so this is also one of the IRS web page item. Okay, so there is, the question was my business organization fully or partially suspended if I had a supply chain issue? Okay, so IRS updated this item on September 14th when IRS issued that moratorium. Temporarily suspending the processing of a new ERC claims. Okay, that's the same date. All right, and so IRS basically says that if you're relying on supply chain disruptions in general, and that the reliance is misplaced. So you cannot claim ERC eligibility simply because you had supply chain disruptions. And in fact, almost all businesses and individuals experience some sort of supply chain disruptions, such as, personally, I had a car repair job that needed to be done. So the auto shop was waiting for parts for like 3-4 months. So before they can fix my car in that situation. So then all businesses or individuals experience some sort of a supply chain disruption. So just by claiming, we had a supply chain issue, that's not enough for your business to qualify for ERC. Okay, and then this is the reference for the IRS Chief Counsel's memo that I was mentioning in the very beginning. So the IRS did have that official document that you can look online. And in fact, I would actually say when you look for government order, you would be hard-pressed to find any government order that says that it limited the supply chain. Okay, so in fact, I have seen this sentence in several of government orders. So, for example, in the California governance order, so the supply chain must continue. Okay, so you cannot say. California probably had a big supply chain disruption issue. We heard the stories that in California ports, so the goods could not be unloaded. So the ship had goods. They were just sitting on the ships for months at the port. But that's a problem. That was a problem. Okay, so no one is denying the government is not denying there was a supply chain issues. Okay, but was that issues caused by the general problem? There was a global impact by the COVID-19, so on the global life. Okay, so but the supply in terms of supply chain disruption, and that's caused by the global impact of COVID-19, but it's not by any specific U.S. government order, so be it the federal, state, or local. Okay, so I would imagine you could not find any government order, any U.S. government order that actually specifically says a certain supply chain industry need to be discontinued. Okay, so you would not find such an order, and in fact, it'll probably be in the opposite. You would find orders like this. Okay, the supply chain must continue. So that's there are more analysis in of course the more reliable analysis. I'm just I'm not an attorney, so this is just my layman interpretation. But you can find the detailed analysis by IRS Chief Counsel in that legal memo. So basically, it says you cannot just rely on supply chain disruption alone for the ERC eligibility. All right, so that will be one of the items you should self-check. Okay, so we'll be talking about several other areas where you should do the self-check when you're checking on your eligibility by government order. So that's the first one we want to mention. It seems to be a big issue that the IRS has a lot of concerns about. So that's why IRS issued this Chief Counsel memo back in July and updated the webpage, and so and so that also may be one of the areas IRS is coming down with audit or requesting for more information or more documents of when IRS process those pending ERC claims. All right, and so another topic I want to touch on is the third quarter 2021 ERC claims based on government order. And so I think most of those are probably shaky, okay? Simply because almost all states ended COVID capacity restrictions. So many states probably still had the masking requirements continued in third quarter or even beyond. Okay, so we know some states, for instance, they had the masking requirement even in fourth quarter 2021 or even part of 2022. Okay, so but masking would hardly impact your business operation. Okay, so all of the capacity restrictions, such as the 25% of your capacity or even 75% capacity for restaurants or things like that, or even social distancing, or almost all states ended such restrictions by the end of the second quarter of 2021. Okay, so we have seen, even as early as the first quarter, when the COVID vaccines were rolling out, some states already started easing their restrictions. So by second quarter, almost everyone who wanted to be vaccinated and could have been vaccinated in second quarter 2021. So that's also one of the reasons why almost all states opened up. So they no longer have those business or capacity restrictions or things like that. For example, California lifted all the capacity restrictions on June 14 of 2021 statewide. Okay, and then Florida to begin with, there's probably not too many statewide restrictions compared to some other states. For example, compared to California, Florida had very little statewide restrictions on businesses. But some counties in Florida imposed more stringent restrictions than the state. But the governor of Florida ordered all local orders to expire. Okay, as of July 1st, 2021. Basically, by the end of the second quarter in Florida, there was a statewide termination of COVID business restrictions. All right, and so state of Iowa is probably somewhere in between. So Iowa did have some restrictions, probably had more restrictions than Florida, but much less restrictions compared to California. And also for most businesses, almost all businesses, the Iowa restrictions ended February 6th of 2021. So that includes social distancing. So after February 6, 2021, there were still recommendations for social distancing, but they were no longer required. Right. So I did not. I wanted to, but I did not put a slide about IRS's web page about government recommendations. So IRS did clarify. So the government recommendations are not government orders. So they do not rise to the government orders. That includes even CDC recommendations or guidance. Okay, CDC is not a regulatory body, so CDC's recommendation, they're just our recommendations, and they are not government orders. So IRS did clarify that. So the recommendations by the government, they're not government orders. All right. So another issue I want to mention is the controlled group. So this is if you own several businesses and they are under different entities, okay? So let's say one may be a C corp, and the other one is LLC, and so yet another one could be another corporation. You elect to be a S corp, so you could have a different legal entities. But if they fall under those entities fall under the so-called controlled group, which roughly speaking means a group of entities, okay, a set of entities that are owned by 80% of their ownership are owned by five or less individuals. Okay, so let's say if you and four other partners, five of you, own four different entities. So then let's say you own 100% of all four entities. So then all four of those entities, even though legally they are different entities, and they form a so-called controlled group. So then when you measure the non-nominee effect, and you have to do that with respect to the entire controlled group instead of each one of them individually. So the non-nominal, for example, the 10%. Okay, so that's one thing. All right, so those are the general items so that you want to pay attention to. So when you look at your eligibility by government order, and so there are also some variations I want to look at, or I want to talk about. And so these are variations by state, by industry, and things like that. So it's unfortunate that the government order, because most of the orders were by the states, so then each state have a different opinion. So if you were running the same business in one state, so then you may not qualify for ERC, but if you're in another state, you might have qualified. And also even if you do qualify in both states, so let's say let's say two people have the exact same business, so even if they both qualify by each state's law and for ERC, and they may qualify for different lengths of periods. So one may be eligible for more quarters than the others. That did create a evenness, so so that the across states. But unfortunately, that's how the law and what the law is. So then we just have to respect that, and we have to go with that. All right. So there is the variation by state. So if you just because let's say your friend offers the same business in another state, and that person qualified, that doesn't mean you qualified. So you do have to look at the order by your own state and by your own local government. Okay, so for example, if you were in California, as I mentioned earlier, that's probably among the most restrictive states, and so you might have a higher chance to qualify for ERC by the government order. And also, if in terms of length, so Guam, well, it's not a state; it's a part of it's a U.S. territory, but it's independent of from the other state. Okay, so Guam, in this sense, is just like another state. Okay, so Guam probably had the longest restrictive period. So as far as I know, even November 2021, Guam still had substantial restrictions such as social distancing. also the social distancing restriction was ditched by most states in second quarter 2021, as mentioned earlier, but Guam still had that even in the fourth quarter of 2021. So you do have to check the government order by your state. So just because someone in another state with the same kind of business qualified by government order doesn't mean you would be. You have to look at your own state's restrictions. And also, even within the same state, and there are different counties. There are different county level or other city level orders. So the different county or different government, they may have issued their own orders. And also, there may be statewide orders, but different county were in different stage, and so you would under different state law, so at different state, or different state order, I should say. Okay, for example, California and Washington, those two states, they introduced the so-called tiered system. So each county had to meet certain thresholds. Usually, there's a multi-factor threshold, and you have to meet those thresholds in order to move your county from one tier from the more restrictive tier to a less restrictive tier. And also in California, for example, I know even the same county were moving back and forth between the tiers. Okay, so maybe start from red to going back to go to orange. If I got the tiers right, okay, so assuming orange is less restrictive, okay, so I go from red to orange. But then, in a different quarter, a different month, so this COVID may be getting worse. So then, state ordered, then you had to return back to the red tier. So in a situation like that, okay. So then in each tier, there are different restrictions. So if your county, so just because, again, just like what I talk about for the different state orders. So just because someone with the same kind of business qualified or ERC in a different county of your state, and that doesn't mean you would automatically qualify for ERC in the same for the same period, because your county may have different orders, may have less restrictive orders, for example. So then even though the other business qualified that's in a different county, and you may not qualify for ERC in that same quarter. So you do have to look at your county. Okay, but of course, if the state order already applied, statewide order already applied to you, and then you qualified under that, you don't even need to go down to the county level. So you need to go down to the county level only when, the statewide order wasn't enough for you to qualify for ERC. All right, so were there federal orders that you can rely on? So the ERC guideline did say, you can rely on federal, state, and local orders. And so ERC did clarify, so on CDC recommendations, so that's a federal agency, but CDC recommendations are not government orders for ERC purposes. So unless, your local government, whether it's a state or a county, and actually required you to follow, okay? If the county had an order that says, your business must follow, CDC recommendations at a time, so then that actually would turn the CDC recommendation into an order by your local government. And the CDC recommendations by themselves, so they are not government orders. Okay, and also, if you talk to your friends and other businesses, so almost everybody was relying on state or local COVID orders. So that's in our experience too. Okay, so only in some very, very rare, very narrow cases, so there were businesses that were relying on full federal COVID orders to help that business to qualify for ERC. Right, and again, of course, if just like when I talked about the county or local orders. So if there's already a state order that applied to you, so that would already qualify you for ERC, and then you don't need to go to other levels of government orders, so you don't have to look for local or federal orders. Okay, so obviously you want to go to here only when you don't have an applicable state order, and also you don't have the applicable local orders. So then you would go to see if there's some federal orders you may be able to take advantage of to qualify you for ERC. Right. And a few words about essential businesses. Okay, so first of all, the essential business, there is a clear definition. If you're not sure whether your business or are essential business, so then look at your state orders. In almost all the states, the very beginning order, they probably define what's the essential business in that state, and then almost all states refer to a federal definition of essential business. So that included, for example, those industries. There's a whole lot more. Okay, so there are hundreds or thousands of businesses. Then, but of course, it's probably maybe a dozen or so categories. And so, but we know there are many, probably hundreds or thousands of different business types, and you need to try to qualify yourself, or put yourself into the right category. And so, generally speaking, obviously we know all the restaurant, grocery, these were essential business, and so are all the doctors, physicians or the specialty doctors. And these, of course, are. And so maybe it was less clear to some whether home care services were essential business, but I believe that in the federal definition, so by that token, so then that would be essential business in almost all states, I would say. Okay, so dental vision, so that's probably also essential business, and so are the trucking and the constructions. So and then those businesses will probably have a harder time to qualify under the government order, because these are essential businesses. Okay, but you can still look at how there was still government orders that probably limited how the essential businesses probably still had a restriction on how the essential businesses should conduct their business or shall conduct their businesses. And so if you see those orders like that, so then you may still try to rely those government orders to qualify your business for the ERC. Okay, and talking about the playing field being uneven. So and then we talk about the variations by state, by local government orders and all that. And there's also a big variation by industry. For example, restaurants, almost all states has some sort of restrictions on restaurant operations, and of course, from state to state, they varied on the severity of the restrictions, so probably, and also the length of the period. So, for example, there may be a total ban on in-person dining for some period, and then that is eased to a certain capacity, whether 25% or 75%, and of the in-person dining capacity, and then later even the capacity is further eased to social distancing. So then and all of that. So and also for different time periods. And the construction and trucking might be the type of business that's hard to qualify in any state. And also for general retail, a lot of states had restrictions, by state order and local orders, depending, had some restriction on general retail stores, but each state may be different, each local government may be different, so you do have to look into your own state and own local government's restrictions. For example, in the state of Iowa, the government order for general retail had a very specific list, okay, such as bookstore, gift store. There's probably a dozen or so retail businesses that were restricted, but not all retail businesses. So only if you fall under that specific list, you can rely on the government order, and otherwise you have to look for other eligibility criteria. Right? And professional firms, this is maybe an interesting one. So in general, the professional firms, they may or may not be classified as essential business, but among all the state orders I can remember, so they all required professional firms' services to continue. Okay, so this would include such as law firms or accounting firms, for example. But those firms may still be able to qualify under the government order rule, but usually these are very unique restrictions. For example, for a law firm, so some court probably ordered the postponement, so some general postponement of the in-person trial, and if a firm was doing litigation in-person litigation in the court, so all of those were postponed. Of course, your firm, the service for that were all restricted. And so and then of course, let's say in 2019, that might be the litigation revenue might be 90% of your revenue. So now in that quarter, when all of those in-person trials was postponed outside that quarter, and of course you're not going to have those revenues. So then, and your operation would be restricted if they're in that situation. Okay. All right. So both due to time restrictions and of course my limited knowledge, I'm not be able to cover many other types of businesses or other industries, but you've got an idea, so you do have to look at the variation by industry as well, okay? And just because somebody had a retail store and they qualified for some quarters in a state or some county, and that doesn't mean you automatically would qualify for the same period, okay? So you do have to look at your state order and your local order to see if you have enough to see if you can find those specific orders that's applicable to your business. All right, I think that covers all I want to talk about today. And so if you have further questions, you can visit us on our website, communitycpa.com, or send us an email, Catherine@communitycpa.com, or call us at 515-288-3188. We are open 6 days a week from Monday through Friday, and then 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Central Time. So all three of our offices are located in Central Time Zone. And so we appreciate your subscribing to our YouTube channel, Community CPA. And also, if you liked our webinars, we would appreciate your giving us a thumb up. And that's all. Thank you for your listening and watching. See you next time.